Okay, so we are recording. Okay, so we have a jam-packed agenda today. The welcome overview, the normal stuff we do at the top of these meetings and a review of the timeline. Then I will hand it over to Andy, who I see is here to review writing day. Oh, okay. Was it? Oh. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna see how it goes with the can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, great. Overview of the writing day, and then we will talk about the general revisions and notes for the outline policy. Each of the note takers is going to review the revisions that were suggested last week, and then we will talk about next steps. Okay.
All right,
Okay.
everyone. I'm going to go ahead and do roll call. Sorry, Becky, to interrupt you. I'm just going to read from the Zoom participant list. If you don't hear your name, please put it in the chat and we'll make sure that it's recorded in the notes. So I see Molly Cook, Becky Raymond, Kathy Olson Tracy, Rena Bryson, Stacy Kregel, Sarah Goldhammer, Justin Arnold, Carrie Thomas, Tara Driver, Drew Thomason, Andy Lasasso, Amy Julian, Todd Lowry. And then there's a phone number 17733604256. If you can unmute and let us know who you are.
Yeah, it's Renee Patrick. Hi.
Oh, hi. And then I have Renee Patrick on the phone. And I believe that's it. Looks like on my end. So again, if you didn't hear your name, go ahead and put it in the chat. We'll make sure that you're noted as present.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Again, we are keeping customer central to the discussion. We are taking and making space. We're avoiding jargon as best as we can. And together we know a lot. The working group priorities are to revise the current policy by May, and to integrate service delivery, improving access and opportunity for everyone, cross-agency collaboration, review the 2019 self-assessment. So these are again ourselves. And
yeah, Becky, we're losing it on the audio.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so we are going to, we had our writing day, and we're talking about also the monthly meeting here in March. April work group meetings. The goal is to have the draft of the revisions by May and to present to the IWIB in June. Okay, and thus far we have reviewed the previous service integration research. We have done a survey of the work group to determine the focus areas of the work group. We have held focus groups. We have developed themes and gathered themes from the work group. And here we are at this point in terms of drafting the policy. Yeah, Kathy.
Just very quickly, I know the formal document for the IWIB, whatever the group did, that formal documentation will drop theoretically the 24th or 25th of this month. Do we have time built into our schedule to review the recommendations from that group that will go into the IWIB to make sure that what we're doing is in step with that? I know many of us have seen that, but what we haven't seen is it hasn't formally dropped for everybody in the service integration work group to see. And then do we have the time in this process to review what that recommendations look like and make sure we're in step? Or is that something we don't think we need to do kind of within this space. I'm just trying to figure out if we need to do that moving forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Kathy, about the commission report and having it be in a spot where everyone in this work group can see it. Because as we were reviewing the slide deck for today, some of the revisions were coming, well, I guess not from the most recent governor's commission report, but from previous versions. So yeah, I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on that in terms of how it can impact our process.
I think that we should build in a little bit of time to look at that report and make sure we're in step. And I know many of us have seen it, and I know many of us have not seen it. So theoretically, it's supposed to drop next week.
Okay.
And looking at what Carrie just put in the chat, yeah, for the copy I saw, I didn't see anything that would, derail us. I think we're, probably right on track.
My read on the report is it's almost entirely a summary of everything that was done in the commission process, which they were pretty transparent about. I mean, I think the recommendations on the workforce, what are they calling it, chief workforce officer, and reimagining the workforce board have more detail to them, but those aren't new recommendations. That's what they were saying all along. So
Yeah, I don't think there's anything earth shattering in that report. I just think that for people who have not yet seen it, do we need to create space? What I'm hearing from you, Carrie, and what I would support and agree with is that it's nothing earth shattering in that report. I'm just curious if we need to give that space in this conversation, or we just need to move on. Because I would agree that there's nothing earth shattering in that document.
We're going to talk about our timeline in a second, so maybe we can talk, move that into the conversation as well, if that's okay. The possibility of an additional meeting to review, or additional time to review those commission recommendations or reports. Is that okay, Becky?
Yep, that makes sense to me. Thanks for bringing it up, Kathy, and for everyone's comments. So today's focus is to create established tools to accomplish our charge, to debrief from our writing day, and review our goal revisions. Because we are essentially 8 weeks away from delivering the revisions to the board, we'd like to suggest that some, all, or any of this group that we meet more frequently. Just we need time together to do these revisions, to have consensus, to build this out. So we're wondering about work group members, appetite to join weekly meetings. So this week, or I guess it would be next week, we would be scheduling the writing group, and we would start the writing group meetings. We already have a work group meeting scheduled in April 17th to the 21st. And, so I don't know, Sarah, do we want to put this, do people want to sign up, or how do you proceed with this type of schedule adjustment usually in these work groups?
honestly, can you restate what the writing group is, or like what the process is? Because when you said sign up, then I thought what I heard was this group was going to meet more frequently, but now I'm understanding something different. So I'm sorry, could you just restate what the ask is, or what the proposed plan is?
Yeah. Becky, do you
Yeah.
want?
No, I mean, Yeah, go ahead, Sarah. I don't know that everyone in this group would have to be part of this. I don't know, Sarah, how do you do it with other groups? Is it the entire working group or is it a subset?
Well, it's up to the work group entirely. So if the group would like to, I think the big point here is that we have about 8 weeks to develop the draft that will be submitted to the CIC on May 17th. So we're open to different ways how to accomplish that goal. But right now we're just looking at the weekly breakdown and how we can accomplish it. So if this group wants to meet weekly, that's an option, and I think a great option. If this group wants volunteers to meet weekly and then report out to the larger work group, I think that's an option. Adding an additional work group meeting between April and May is an option. We're just proposing meeting more frequently, so we can accomplish this goal of revising the policy and our charge of revising the policy. And I think Becky, like as Becky was saying, we love you all's feedback as to how to do that.
Yeah, do people have thoughts? I mean, we could just set the meetings and invite everyone from the work group.
Okay, I promised myself I wasn't going to be talking through this meeting, but here I go.
That's okay.
I think it's important that with intentionality, we ensure representation at each of these writing group meetings with members of all 4 core partners. If we can't do that, then I think there has to be a review process and a feedback loop so that people who are not writing actually have a voice in what that looks like. So if we have a small writing group, then there's got to be a mechanism for us to go in and provide feedback. So I'm wondering if creating a series of like Google Docs or other shared documents through Teams or whatever mechanism we use, and the writing group meets whoever that is, the rest of this commission or group can go in and provide feedback, because I think that feedback loop is really critical as we wrap this up.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Kathy. And we had talked internally about like Survey Monkeys, a Google Doc's a great idea as well. And we'd also spoken internally of the importance of having representation from the work group, the core titles, partners, anybody who could be involved. Those are really great points.
I mean, in that case,
So-
I think that we should definitely have the 4 core titles involved in this writing group, because there might not even be time for us to establish a feedback loop. I think the writing group is the feedback loop.
I agree with that. I think that each core partner should designate one person to be responsible to the writing and responsible for additional feedback from their agency or wherever. That's one thing. The other thing is, I thought could we have a Google Doc of each of the 3 things that we're going to be editing? And I think everybody should be required to review it before the meeting, and that each meeting focus on one section. And if we need more than one meeting for a section, we schedule it or we use that. But yeah, I guess I agree with what everybody's saying, but I don't want to add a new survey or Google Doc or something. Can we just work in what is going to be the final document? And I don't think that, I guess I think about this differently than Kathy. I wouldn't recommend everybody have an opportunity to provide feedback in a Google Doc and then not be part of the writing process, because then we end up with the people in the writing process end up with feedback from somebody who's not there, and then they have to interpret it, etc. That's why I think if you have a point person from each core partner, then they can go to their colleagues and say, what do you, speak now so that I know what to bring to the writing process.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is a weekly writing group that has at least one representative from each core partner, and also everyone from the writing group can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. And everyone from this work group is invited to be part of the weekly writing sessions. Does that sound right?
And we can use the existing Google document to Carrie's point. That way there's not 45 links to different documents floating around for many reasons. I think that's a good idea as well.
Yes. We have to keep it streamlined. Okay. I don't know, Sarah, how you want to go about scheduling the weekly writing group meetings. I mean, we know what the weeks are, we know what our deadlines are, but we'll need to set these up pretty quickly because next week we'll be scheduling them. So should everyone stay tuned for a doodle and get back right away, or do we,
Yep.
is that, okay, all right.
I think Molly and I have looked at our schedules internally to make sure that we have coverage for whenever the group decides to meet. We'll send out a doodle following this meeting, like today or tomorrow, with some options, and then try to get those on everybody's schedule. And just to reiterate, we'll send everybody on the work group the invite for a weekly recurring meeting, and then we'll check back in specifically with the title directors and partners to make sure that they have someone designated to attend those meetings. Does that sound good to everybody?
Okay, hearing nothing, I assume that we're good to go with this plan of attack to over the next 8 weeks. Yes, okay, great. So from here, I will turn it over to Andy.
Thank you, Becky. It feels a little odd. I think probably 80% of our attendees today were present, but for those that weren't, or for those that have slept since then and need a recap, I think we had a great day in Normal. I think there was a lot of good conversations. I mean, not only at the work group tables, but especially the commentary that came afterwards as we presented. And so next slide, please. The way our work tables and presentations work for those that weren't able to attend, Drew Thomason set us off with a good, very simple setting that policy is where we want to be and recommendations are how we get there. And so with that mantra in mind, we went to our task and we went through the provided themes that ICSPS had put together for us, and had gone through them kind of bullet by bullet, but also creating our own bullets as we went, and ultimately finding that a lot of what we thought was policy was really more recommendations. And so, and you'll see that in the later slides as well. And next slide. And so we also, when we're finished with our policies and recommendations, well, then we started grouping them and presenting to the rest of the room. And that's where a lot of good conversation happened. That's where, not to name names, but some people that put some thought into the words that went in got gutted, and it hurt some feelings on Andy's side. So I used a lot more words than other people like, and that's okay. So, but all in all, it was good. It was very productive. I really applaud the team that put it together, because it was completely productive. I mean, to get in with 5 hours with that amount of work, I thought was pretty stellar. So thank you for all those who attend, and thank you to ICSPS for putting it on.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay. But yes, thank you, Andy, and apologies about being gutted, but it was a productive day.
I kid.
Yeah, I know, I was kidding too. So from here, we're gonna go through the 3 areas with the note takers from each group. And we just want to ensure that nothing is lost, find the right place for the feedback, look at the revisions with the whole policy in mind, and one thing we haven't really done is spent time looking at the overview. We've been really focused on the actual policy goals. And so I do think some of the edits that came out in the policy section, like in the goals section, would be more in line with an overview or kind of the vision of the policy. So as we turn it over to the note takers from each group from writing day, I do want to encourage the group to keep that in mind about, are we putting the items in the right area? And so here we've put the outline of the service integration policy, because we haven't even touched the purpose or the overview or the definitions. We've focused in on 3 of the goals and their outcomes. And so as we go into this deeper phase of weekly writing and really looking directly at the language in the policy, I asked Sarah to put this slide here just as a grounding point for the work ahead of us. And so as you get this deck, it'll be pulled out in terms of the purpose and the overview and where we want the broader comments and themes to go. So from here, yes, so from here we'll hand it over to Stacy, who was in Goal 1 revision and feedback work group.
Becky. So the original policy for the customer-centered design goal states one-stop partners collect and use customer input to design and deliver integrated services to all job seeker, employer, and system customers. The goal of the outcome of this goal is that one-stop services are shaped by customer needs and preferences. After the writing day, the new draft, that language that we came up with, is regardless of their entry point, the customer is at the center of design and delivery of integrated services. All partners should clearly communicate and collaborate. Then we kind of cut it off there and talked about how there's some additional undecided language that goes in a little deeper on how the partners should communicate and collaborate, or if we should just cut it off there and or should we add the language, all partners should clearly communicate and collaborate through tools such as customer satisfaction surveys, intake assessment, and referrals with an understanding of eligibility and confidentiality. And then just a little tweak to the bottom piece with the outcome of this goal is that customers, and I think there's a typo there. I think we meant to say the goal of the outcome of this goal is that customers receive services that are shaped by the customer needs and preferences. So we just have to make that little change there, but that's what we came up with for the customer-centered design goal.
Great, thank you. Does anybody from that group or anyone on this call have any response or feedback to this first goal? Okay. All right, in that case, then I think we will move to the second area.
Great, thank you. So this goal looked at intake and assessment, and you can see the original portion of this policy on the left. And then what this group really added was, if you look to point C, there was quite a bit of focus group feedback regarding assessments. And so item C reviews, looking at assessments, looking at the purpose of assessments, and to the extent possible, using those assessments to be asset-based, focused on identifying and documenting next steps. There were also a few edits in terms of letter B. So you'll see that from the original to the revised, we added communicate and collaborate, just to again pull in that partner communication piece that we saw so much in the focus groups. And then at the bottom, in terms of the outcome of the goal, it looks like we have referrals are noted, at the bottom as a note, but you'll see at the bottom, we talk about this could be an opportunity to have a standardized state report and looking at also how vocational rehabilitation intersects with all of this. So this revision is more, adding letter C and then adding a few notes for us to think about as we move forward.
Great, thank you, Molly. Just want to also open it up here if anyone has anything they would like to add to Molly's report out. Okay, hearing none, we will keep moving.
Well, I do have one.
Oh, yeah, Kathy, thank you.
The hurdle that I'm running into in a few APCs and a few LWIAs is that at the one stop, they're using one form of assessment. At the program level, they're using a second. Could there be a space that assessments need to be approved by state agencies? I don't want to get too detailed here, but what we can't do is have a single provider APC, single provider LWIA, and at the LWIA office, they're using one test, and at the local adult ed, they're using a separate one. And they have to be, there are very specific assessments that you can use in adult ed or they don't count. So should we get to that level or should we just keep it with assessments? I don't know if we need to get to that granular detail. So I'm just kind of clarifying from our partners if we need to specify that assessments must be approved by state agencies, because for Title II, it would be very specific allowances. So I'd like to hear what everyone thinks about that.
I was kind of thinking of going the opposite way, meaning softening the language and see if partners use different assessments at the same time, they should attempt to find an assessment that they can share or something. Some of this is, it's a little too granular, and I think one of the things we talked about was that there was going to be a difference between initial intake and assessment of people walking into a job center versus enrollment into a program. And what this was really looking at was just kind of that initial touch. So we didn't want to go into XYZ test for XYZ program. We were trying to keep it general, I thought.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Justin. Carrie? Oh, you raised your hand? Yeah,
I
okay.
think thank you, Justin, for bringing that up about how we were making this distinction between intakes versus assessment. So just as we go to the next phase of this drafting, I think we should just keep that in mind, that sometimes the different purposes of it. To answer your question, Kathy, I am not sure how granular this should be or not, but I do think your point or the example you give is something that has to be deliberated about somewhere, because if we're going to be customer focused, what is the purpose of having two different assessments that do essentially the same thing when one of the entities can only use one, right? They have no choice. I mean,
Right.
So I can't answer that, but it does seem like a custom, sort of a user-centered perspective might be like, let's just use one. So maybe the one that is required, like that we have no choice, we have no flexibility about, is just the one we defer to. But that's just a thought at this moment by somebody who doesn't have to make that decision. So
Right, and
Yeah.
to support that and to kind of clarify, in Title II, there are only certain tests we're allowed to use. I don't know about the other titles. That's why I don't know that this has to be so prescriptive for the policy, but I am concerned of what we're seeing at the local level, where people are trying to do the best they can for their clients. And sometimes that creates that disconnect between partners. And if we think we need to be clear here that the NRS or assessments must be approved, or to everyone else's point, maybe that's too granular and that's just the customer service and technical assistance we provide. I'm happy either way. I just wanted to kind of clarify what we talked about at that meeting.
Yeah, and I think there's a way for us to build it into maybe point B where center staff communicate and collaborate in providing, like, we could maybe flesh it out in terms of people know, I'm imagining in some of these APC, LWIA, sorry for using acronyms, that they don't even know, or when they're designing programming, they weren't even fully aware that they were using two separate things, and I think that there's a way to enhance B and capture some of the things about an expectation that all partners are aware of tools and align as much and as align, and align around them. So I think there's somewhere in the middle, I guess is my point.
And I'm comfortable where we land on this. I just wanted to kind of have that as a final talking point, because I think once this is done, our conversations are over, and this is where we are for the next couple of years. So I want to be thorough in my questions.
Yeah, and we have time right now to discuss this. I think this is a great time and a great point you bring up, Kathy. I know in the focus groups, I think, which is what you're referring to, some people said they use TABE and others use CASAs. So is that, I know we're not going to list it in the policy, because policy should stand or try to stand the test of time. But is there a reason why one title is using one and one is using the other, and we can kind of reverse engineer the language from there? Or is that just?
Well, I like what Becky said about the language saying that the partners have to collaborate together, because I do believe in local control, but they have to have the ability to do what's best for their community within the guidelines of the law that we have to follow. So if that point can be fleshed out where it's the partners at the local level have to collaborate on decisions on assessment, that could take care of it, because their Title II people are going to know what's required. Title I people are going to know what's required for them, and same Title III. I mean, we can get there if we clarify that there has to be that coordination and relationship and joint decision making at the local level. That I think might do what I need it to look like, so we don't have a single LWIA where a student and a client has to take two different assessments, because the one staff uses CASAS and the program uses TABE. So somebody's either gonna have to shift their entire training and their internal staff or so, and I'm seeing that happening across the state. So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Oh, I like how Carrie's got that.
Yeah. And then Justin, do you want to come off mute and say your point, or do you want us to read it?
Changing C to, if partners use different assessments for the same purpose, to the extent possible, they should work towards using one assessment and where results can be shared with partners, something like that, where you're just, the idea obviously is to have conversations with each other about where are students having to take or where are participants having to take a test, and can we just identify one test where the results can be shared, but without kind of getting into a lot of this other stuff where you're kind of getting a little granular, but and also not mandating it. They must. So softening the language a bit, but putting in the spirit of, hey, if you use different assessments, think about it, try and work towards using one and sharing results.
I'll just say what I use the term must, because I think that there should be a requirement that you should try. So maybe the outcome isn't one, but I do think it should be to at least have a conversation. I don't think requiring a conversation amongst the partners using different assessments is that much of a requirement. That would mean taking out the word must.
Must is
I
not
also think
a conversation
that,
starter.
I also think that the second part of what I was suggesting is that to say what we're trying to get at, which is the user experience. So just to make that as a prompt. So that's why I put in what I put in there. And I
Yep.
don't have, I agree with, to the extent possible, they should try to use one assessment. I don't disagree with that, but I also think that I don't think the requirement that you make the attempt, I don't know, in a 15-minute meeting, which would comply with the must, would really be that much of a burden.
Yeah, and I know it's silly to argue over a word. I think everyone probably feels like they have better use of their time, but putting the word must in something does not mean have a conversation and maybe do it. Putting the word must in something means must do it. So
Well, I don't mind actually having a disagreement over a word. If what comes after the word must is must make an attempt or must have a conversation, then that's what it means. It doesn't mean must do. In my interpretation of that, when I read the word must, that's what I see, is what's it asking me to do. I don't think what are all the possible things that somebody could possibly be asking me to do. I just go with the words that are provided. So if there is a less strong, more acceptable to Justin way of communicating that this is really a requirement that should be expected, I'm happy to, I'm happy to think about that. I'm not the final decider by any means, but I do think my point is an important one.
sure. To your point, reading what follows after, I'm just reading, they must designate a single assessment. That's what I was talking about. So if you want to change that sentence to, they must have a conversation about it. Sure.
Well, I wrote some things in the chat where the word must was used, so possibly you didn't read what I wrote in
They
the
must
chat.
take into account the impact
Yeah.
on the experience of,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, just not must, they must do this with this assessment, I thought was a little much, but they must talk, they must think about how it affects job seekers. Sure.
So the goal, I think that we're circling around is we want to give direction to the local areas that they must at least have a conversation to get rid of undue assessments, right? Like that's the step we're gonna must them to do to, or
Yeah. I think that it is worth being more intentional because the old policy, as we look at it on the screen here at the left, I mean, center staff collaborate in providing a holistic assessment. I mean, it says it there, but we know that it's not done across the board in practice at the local level. So, we will strengthen the language in some way so that we don't come, after we make the revisions that local areas are unclear that they must communicate or they must know, at least, I mean, I really feel like some local areas didn't realize this was happening across their partnership, so I would almost think that we could strengthen it too. That it should be in designing program delivery, because we don't, we want it to be done at the front end of service integration. So, yeah, I think that if we look at B and we know the state of how things are going in the field, then it's already there in B and we need to strengthen it somehow. And I think it doesn't exactly have to get granular, but it does have to be more explicit in some way because it was already there and we know that it wasn't fully implemented.
So are we thinking strengthening point B and then maybe removing the they must designate a single assessment from C? Is that what the group is leaning towards? Just while we're all here.
I think leaving a C there is fine. I think I would recommend everything besides the first sentence gets dropped off and you just change the language so it doesn't say must designate a single assessment, but instead must consider how duplicative, this is too wordy, duplicative tests affect job seekers, which was something along the lines of what Carrie was saying, or find ways to share that information from tests and use those results. I don't know, but if you use C to simply say, make an attempt to see what assessments different partners are using, and then make sure there's not multiple test taking. I think that is what we're trying to get to maybe, but I think it just needs to be like one sentence, not all this other stuff.
And does the group agree? Does that sound good to everyone? Sarah, do you want to come off mute or do you want me to read your chat?
I just basically, as Justin was talking, so I'm not sure this is really where he was headed, but I just took a combination of Justin and Carrie and put it together just for the group to consider. If partners use different assessments for the same purpose, the partners must take into account the impact on the experience of the job seeker / student who has to go through multiple assessments, and they should work towards using one assessment and share results with partners.
Oh, we have a thumbs up from Justin.
I would just take out for the same purpose in case, I mean, everybody has a different purpose, so for similar purpose or just take it out. I think it would still work. Because I could say my purpose is Title III and your purpose is Title II, so that's not the same purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, I just did what Carrie said and took that phrase out and stuck it back in the chat again, just so that people could see what it looks like.
I like that.
Yeah, and I think that broadens it to assessments at large. Great job, everyone. Becky, did you want to move on to the third or the fourth goal, or do you want?
Yeah, I think we could move on unless I think we've probably worked on this one as far as we're going to right now, but any last comments before we move on to the next goal? Okay.
All right. This next goal is long, so it's actually divided into 2 slides. The original goal has 4 results of service integration. Services for all one-stop customers are delivered by function rather than by individual programs. Processes through which customers experience the system, including referral and follow-up, are streamlined and aligned. Individual services planned for job seeker and employer customers are living documents. Customers receive timely and coordinated access to WIOA employer job seeker services. Those go on. The outcome of these goals is that all customers are provided access to quality integrated services that meet their needs in an efficient and seamless manner. And during the writing day, we added a goal to service goals. At the top, a letter A, we added the foundation of service integration is built upon a shared system of building relationships and communication among partners, supported by shared leadership of the 4 core WIOA partners. I'm going to pause there because I think that's a big one that we added there, that was added, and just ask for feedback before we go into the last 3 of the service goals or results.
For me, it's just kind of a lot, and maybe I'm committed to working through it on, 6 to 8 writing days, but today I don't know if I can chop this up, but it's just a lot.
I think one of the things that we talked about last week was, I don't think anybody disagreed with this statement. It was whether it needed to be here or not was more the conversation around it. So I would say if it doesn't go here, it should definitely go in the introduction or somewhere that I mean, I think there was consensus in the group that this is true. We need to build relationships. We need to, this is very important work. And I think that's why it was put down to paper that yes, that we need to state this. So yes, maybe in the overview, someplace.
Thanks, Sarah.
And Tara suggested in the overview.
Perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and read point B that was revised. If you still have thoughts on point A, you can still have those, share those. Services for all customers are delivered individually in the spirit of collaboration. Partners at all levels should communicate and leverage resources to effectively meet customers' needs. An assessment of a customer needs is a process. The system meets every job seeker's employment and education training needs by actively listening, transforming engagement from transactions to conversations, and from being guided by checklists to developing relationships. Do we have feedback on this point?
I was in this writing group, and when we say an assessment of customers' needs is a process, that seems a little ambiguous at this point in time. Just the language itself, because yeah, we know it's a process. What does that mean exactly? And then again, if you get into additional language here, you are just like a very long. So I'm not sure what the resolution is on that, but for someone to read that and come away with a conclusion, for me, and I'm a little simple, but it's a little difficult to come away with that particular sentence.
Todd, we're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. It might have just been me, but it was a little hard to hear some of that.
Well, I'm sure it's me, and let me type something in.
Maybe could you type some of it into the chat? So anything we didn't hear, we get some of it in the chat.
And Tara says that this goal might be wordy and vague. Anyone else?
Yeah, when I said I needed to sit back and kind of think about how to write this, I was talking about this whole thing. It's wordy and vague, and it's kind of aspirational, and it's not really like do these things for policy. So I think that we really need to kind of cut it up in the writing time and make it make sense according to what we're trying to achieve with a service goal. Right now, it's pretty far away from being like strong policy statements.
Yeah, I think this is the reason why I added in the overview piece as part of our conversation, because as much as I like this language and these sentiments, I feel like they're not exactly where we want them in the policy piece. But we might not want to lose the language. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that if you're in a local area and looking to this and this is kind of in my mind, the thorniest one, because it's got so many pieces and it's very expansive. But how can it also give direction like the last one, where we're really getting discrete in terms of using, one intake process, like it's kind of far from that. So yeah, maybe we want to just go to C and D, Sarah, so that we save that, part for, oh, now we have an E, for the writing group.
Definitely. C, the draft revisions that were done on the writing day is processes through which customers experience the system, including referral and required follow-up, are streamlined and aligned through the use of ongoing partner and one-stop communication and collaboration. The system understands confidentiality as a way to prevent stigma associated with the use of public services. Point D says individual service plans and or goal statements are used to provide and coordinate services that follow up through the WIOA partnership and are updated over time to respond to changing customer needs and should be evaluated for connection opportunities on an ongoing basis. Partners share the responsibility to make sure the connections between programs are made. And E states customers receive timely and coordinated access to all services, whether on-site, through technology, at a partner site, or by appropriate and accessible community services. And that one's very similar to the point D of the original goal.
I feel like all of these points are definitely something we should be looking for. But I think the wordiness of it and some of the statements are very subjective. It could be a little bit more direct to the point, no matter who's reading it or what type of service organization is reading it.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that the confidentiality piece is as much about stigma as it is about cybersecurity and things like that, you know, so I think we might want to, when we design the schedule of how we're going to go through these goals in the writing, I think we should probably start with this one and not save it to the last, because it's just so big that it needs to, we need to really think through which pieces of these are overview, you know, mission, you know, whatever the top pieces are, and which ones are going to be in the actual ending point of the policy. So if you can make a note of that.
Yep, definitely. And Todd noted in the chat, goal 4B, I'll scooch back one. The sentence, "an assessment of a customer needs is a process," is ambiguous at best and leaves the reader wondering what exactly this is trying to convey. It certainly does not translate well to a policy point, which I think others have mentioned as well. And then Carrie, did you want to come off mute, or do you want me to go ahead and read your chat?
I was just responding to Becky's point about confidentiality and cybersecurity. I just wanted to say that the way it's stated did specifically come out of a conversation about stigma related to use of public programs. That doesn't mean this shouldn't change or belong somewhere else, but it really was in its origin about stigma.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't in that group, so thanks for letting me know, Carrie.
And Kathy?
Yeah, and this is Renee to kind of.
Oh, sorry, Renee. You go for it.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks for accommodating me on the phone. I'm wondering with to Todd's, like to address what Todd is raising, more specifics is it's a dialogue, it's an exchange. It's it gets to like the idea of motivational interview, like use techniques called motivational interviewing or ways that include the person rather than being like next. I don't know, besides process, what are some other specific ways to describe that? But it's like, how do you describe opposite of, here's your hamburger, goodbye service from our local area?
Yeah. Well, internally, oh, sorry, Justin, you just come up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think that a lot of our backgrounds, we have these things that are important to us, like acid-based this or motivational interviewing for these purposes, or like adult learning philosophies or something. And it seems like as a group, sometimes we're taking these like professional development things or tools or ideas that we enjoy and trying to put them into a policy. And I just wonder, like, as we're going forward and writing for 8 weeks, should we be dividing like things that we believe in philosophically and through our training? Should we divide that from what a good policy is? Because I think that could help us focus a little bit more on policy instead of this thing that I find really useful and that's important to me. And I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but that seems to be, for me, my sticking point with some in the group is we're trying to write a policy, not talk about the professional development activity that you think is important, you know?
I also have to jump to another meeting, and I know I said some version of this when you brought this up, Justin, last week. I do think it is possible to communicate with clarity some of these things that are you characterize as ideas or philosophies or things that we like. So I do think that we should give some consideration to it. I think that anything that humans I know this is big picture, but I pretty much think we can put anything in policy we want to. I fully agree that it has to be actionable. And sometimes we aren't there yet with some of these ideas. But I will say, just for the record, I think it is possible, and I think we should give it a try in some areas. And I do have to jump off to a call.
Okay, great. Yep, we're at time, everyone.
Yeah, thanks,
so-
everyone. And I'm sorry so many that we've gone to time, but this was a great conversation. And we will be back in touch on the weekly writing group work.
Expect an email
Thank
from
you.
Mhm.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. It's just us and Drew's otter right now.
Let me kick this AI thing off. He'll get this transcript.
Bye, Drew Otter.
Bye, Drew Potter. Remove. All right, I'm gonna stop share. Okay,
I feel like that was productive. That was
Right.
good.
Yeah.
It's just
Oh,
gonna, we get through 4 first though, because 4 is gonna be the stickiest one. The others are gonna be.
I think that was a great suggestion, Becky. We'll never get to it if we keep leaving it last.
And
do-
I think that, can you stop recording too?
shoot, Molly, is that you or is it me?